the Nürburgring 24 hours this weekend.
Oh, really?
At the Nordschleife.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's just a brutal.
I've driven that track.
Oh, I went there and shot commercials there for.
Oh yeah,
10
right.
days,
I remember you saying that. Right.
Which brand was that?
Well, it was kind of a two-part shoot. It was actually tire commercial for General Tire, high-performance tire that was being introduced. And we also shot some Pontiac Fiero print over there. Jeff Swartz shot it. Looks like one of Jeff's.
Fiero.
Dirk Werner clocked an 832.3 in the BMW M3 GT. It was 8th overall.
2 minutes.
Do you remember your time when you did it, or what you?
No, because they were doing construction on the straightaway, which was weird. They had construction equipment out there, guys doing this.
Did they say?
They're flashing by.
Fines doubled in construction zones.
So this was in Vipers and Viper GTSs. This was the launch of the Viper GTS.
Yeah.
And they did a great trip. We went to the Nürburgring, the North Track. We went to Spa-Francorchamps. And we went to, it looks like it's spelled Reims, but it's the French pronounce it Rem. And it's abandoned. It's like a ghost track. It's now part of the main roads, but you come to in the middle of nowhere.
And the
with weeds
grandstand's
growing
still
up.
there.
The grandstands and the pits are there, just all crumbling. And it was really cool. It was really good. And but yeah,
it's the Roman Colosseum of.
They, I mean, we got going pretty quick, but we were not allowed to do lap after lap after lap after lap.
Yeah.
So you could do a lap, pull in, and pull right out and keep going, but you
but even
couldn't get in the rhythm.
8 to 10 minute lap, it's hard to develop a rhythm because it's almost like it takes you.
That's right.
A week to learn the track. It's like, oh, yeah.
It would take me a week.
Yeah.
I just learned sections of it.
Seconds.
Oh, okay.
$15, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone, passion for excellence. Chevrolet, the all-new Chevrolet Cruze. Get used to more. And by Hyundai. Experience the 2011 Hyundai Sonata today at HyundaiSonata.com.
Well, thanks for joining us again, folks. Great having you back here for Autoline After Hours. And joining me, as always, my co-host, the Autoextremist Peter De Lorenzo.
Good morning, John.
We're laughing because it ain't morning.
It ain't. It's morning somewhere.
It's morning someplace, and we have people listening to us elsewhere in the world where it is the morning right
Simon.
now. Simon, right?
Yeah.
And Peter Robinson in Sydney. And also joining us right now is Charlie Vogelheim.
Good morning.
Yeah, from?
Great to be here. From the left coast.
Well, and the company you work for.
Oh, IntelliChoice.
And explain a little bit of what IntelliChoice does.
IntelliChoice, we're part of the Motor Trend Auto Group. We've been doing cost of ownership studies for 25 years now. We actually were the ones that started it. And it was long ago before the internet existed. You used to fax the information out, and did all the work for AAA and even did some work for Consumer Reports back in the day, and have been plodding along on cost of ownerships, which consumers don't jump up and down over, but they're all concerned about it. At the end of the day, it's like, I don't really care about that. Really? What about fuel? Well, that's kind of important to me. What about how much it's going to be worth when it's used? Well, that's kind of important. What about maintenance and repair costs? Well, I guess I care about that. So anyway.
They do care.
They do.
We'll get into some more of that.
Yeah.
And then joining us later in the show, too, we're going to have Chris Borroni-Bird from General Motors, who's got probably one of the coolest jobs in the industry, just dreaming up all kinds of fantasy things to do and then going out and doing them. So we'll get him to talk a bit about that as well.
Car industry, right?
All in the car industry, right. But Peter, we got...
Also affectionately known as King of the Pod People. He operates in a different dimension.
Right. Well, Peter, we got to talk about your column, man, because you came out guns a-blazing these days about Dan Ackerson, GM's CEO.
Well, I'm concerned about the level of tone deafness that Dan seems to display, and I'm also concerned about the fact that GM's PR chief, Selim Bingal, doesn't seem to be able to reach Dan. And
now, this all came out of what you're coming off of is a Detroit News newspaper interview that he did, and he said some kind of outlandish things in that.
Yeah, I wrote a column after the article appeared, which was early June. Then I wrote a column about the true believers at GM who really were responsible for getting the Volt to market, which I think is a singular achievement. But there's kind of a dichotomy going on with GM right now. There's Dan at the top and his loyalists, and the people who I refer to as the true believers who are churning out the stuff. And that dichotomy shouldn't exist, really. And then I thought about it some more, and I just think that unless Dan decides to run silent and run deep and not talk to the media, I'm not so sure he's the best guy to be running GM. And, of course, that's like turning the rock over on the anthill, because then all of a sudden it's just like, wait a minute, if you're really arguing for a regime change, that's the 5th CEO in 3 years. And of course the Wall Street types will be apoplectic, but my point was, well, maybe not if you give it some thought. If Dan isn't the guy, then maybe a regime change is in order. But he has got to he has to understand that some of the perspectives he brings are not really working. Or if he's thinking that, he shouldn't be saying it. So something's got to give, I think.
Well, if something's not working, who cares if it's another CEO? I love military history. Abraham Lincoln kept changing generals until he found out one that worked. And so I think the same applies in business, too.
And that was U.S. Grant, right?
That was U.S. Grant, exactly. But what triggered the third column that you've done? Is this you hearing back from people within General Motors?
Yeah, there are some deeply embedded auto-extremist moles in GM, but they're all over the industry, actually. Not just domestic car companies, but, serious, thoughtful, high-level executives who, everyone asks me about the letters. One of the good things about Autoextremists, read the letters, because they're always good. But I also say it's the letters I don't print that are the really good ones. And so, yeah, I've been hearing back from inside the corporation, and some thoughtful executives are a little worried. They were very displeased with the interview. The product development people were very displeased with the interview because, Dan basically said, we're going to end this 5 o'clock culture where people leave at 5 o'clock. Well, as John and I have discussed many times, none of the people we know in this business, if they might go home at 5 o'clock, but they're still working,
Yeah, and as I said, they're going home at 5 o'clock because they came in at 5 o'clock in the morning.
So that was
people I know at GM. I don't know anybody at GM personally who has this mental, I'm just checking out kind of culture.
Yeah, and that was insensitive. And the product, I got a lot of email from product development people deeply involved in the very key stuff, and they were just very disheartened. Is about the best word I could describe it. Just, even if he believes it, he shouldn't be saying that, because that doesn't make us feel good, and we're busting our asses. He made a comment specifically about the next generation CTS, that it's just okay. And I heard from a bunch of people saying, hey, we're not looking at it as just okay. We're trying to make it the best we can possibly make it. So, that kind of stuff, it has a shelf life longer than uranium when you say stuff like that, and you're the CEO. And I don't know. Dan's got to rein it in, or Selim's got to make him rein it in.
I just want to ask, as the out-of-town guy sitting here, and I know this isn't, this is a Detroit discussion kind of that's going on here, but just in terms of follow-up, was there anything that was reported that he said that he questioned in terms of the accuracy of what he meant, or out of context, or anything like that? Are there any aspects of the conversation that?
Well, I didn't read anyone that brought up like I did after he did the but there was a lot of chatter.
Right.
Peter's
the only one who's really written in depth about this that I've read. And like you said, there's a lot of chatter in town about it. But, some of the things he said in the past, he's made fun of Toyota and the Prius and the people who buy it. He's made fun of Mercedes, the C-Class. He said, oh, it's a C student, it's not competitive.
He dismissed the effort that Ford is putting into Lincoln.
Right, I recall that from the most recent.
So was anything that he said factually wrong? No.
I don't mean it that way. I always say, what, is he just being funny? Or, and again, this is a guy running a big company, and obviously I'm not trying to say it's just a Detroit company by any means at all, but it's always, when it's a city industry, it's, the actual statements versus the performance seem to become more important, just as an observation.
Well, leadership is a tough thing in this business.
Yeah, it is.
And,
And leaders are hard to come by.
Yeah, leaders are hard to come by. Really, really good ones.
And I distinguish between thoroughly competent managers and leaders. Alan Mulally is a leader. He has transformed the culture at the Ford Motor Company. And, they're worth their weight in gold.
Well, again, these extremely large corporations, and you sit there and you see different people come in as you're talking about changing generals, and you go, nobody can make a change, and then you just give an example of someone who has made a change. And so you say, oh, well, wait, it can be done.
Well, and the other thing that sort of, sent my thinking into motion was I've been approached several times saying, Dan is a good guy, you just need to get to know him. And, I'm not commenting on Dan's personal, I'm sure he's a good guy, a good family man, and all that stuff, good friend to his friends and everything, but, this is a very visible position in this industry, not just this town, but this industry. And some of the comments he made in that interview reflected badly on the old whipping boy, Detroit, again. And that was bothersome, too.
Well, nothing's going to change if he's not going to lose his job as long as profits in the company continue to increase. But I think, based on what you're writing, if they plateau here, if they flatline, Wall Street is going to pounce. They are expecting results. They've been led to believe that there are going to be results. And,
well, the bailout,
that's the only thing that's going to change.
Yeah, the bailout set the table for those results. How often can you walk into a position where the debt's been wiped out as a CEO? Here's the keys to the car. All that debt that burdened everyone else before you got here is gone. So yeah, Jen, you make a very good point. If the profits flatline, then there's going to be some problems.
All right.
So.
Hey, some of the other news this week that just broke today, actually, was the J.D. Power Initial Quality Survey, and the big news out of that is Ford took it on the chin. They dropped way down the list, and I'm wondering what you guys are reading into all this.
Well, aside from the brand specific, I heard, a lot of the quality numbers dropped overall. After years of getting better and better, and of course you can attribute that to the number of vehicles being rolled out now as all of a sudden, more and more cars are hitting the marketplace. I know that's always the time when the IQS numbers are.
Or did they change their survey? Because as you know, J.D. Power changes its survey every 3 to 4 years, so you can't compare it, going over the years. You can't.
Well, I was there when they
I know
changed
you
it
worked
last
there.
time. I was, and it isn't something that they take lightly. I will say that. Obviously there's, and things do need to change over time. So hopefully it's done in a way. And unfortunately, what happens is if you're a manufacturer working towards a goal and the goal changes, it can be very frustrating. Is that a good word? But the thing is I know, IQS, as we were talking about, it's a a lot of that is not as much about the product as it is about the build process and the factories and the suppliers, and it's being put into the car right away. It's a good indicator in terms of not only
and that's the first 90 days, right?
Yeah.
The IQS.
Okay, 3 months.
Yeah.
They survey people who have owned their vehicle for 3 months and say, do you like this? Have you had a problem with that? And yada, yada, yada. But that's a key thing in our discussion as we'll get into it more.
And Ford took it on the chin because people were frustrated with the My Touch stuff and
Sync, supposedly. Though Sync's been on the market for, what, 4 years now?
Yeah, now let me just point out one thing here. First of all, it's 90 days. I'm much more interested in that survey that, what is it, that 3 years down the road?
Vehicle Dependability Survey from J.D. Power.
That's much more accurate.
It is.
But the other thing, let's not forget that once upon a time, the same survey crucified Hummer because people bought it and were dismayed with the mileage.
The fuel economy.
Right.
Yeah, it was just like, huh? You know, so, you know, yeah, there's some frustration with the My Touch, you know. When I get the media cars and I drive this stuff, you know, I don't explore all that stuff. I don't have time. I mean, you know. But I've never had a problem with at least the initial interfacing, but I guess there are a lot of people who are frustrated with it, and so they marked Ford down for that.
Well, there's on so many things nowadays, since we all have them, we all have our smartphones or iPads or everything in between, we have a way of doing something. And any company now, Ford, Apple, whoever, that are making something that appears to be intuitive, all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get this. This isn't going to be so hard. And when it is, all of a sudden it just turns, oh, wait a second. It should have done this when I pressed this, this, and this. Why isn't it? Or I'm used to that. It's incredibly difficult to simplify these things. We've had, you know, discussions amongst ourselves. How nice would it be that you just had an iPad or a tablet device that you could just put in the car when you're going, and it already has your music, and it already has your contact, it already has your mapping, and the mapping that you're used to. Audi just came out with the A6 this last week, and again, it has Google Maps on that, because so many of us are used to Google Maps. All of a sudden, is that better? Is that Audi that did it? Well, they did it because Google Maps is in there, but it's, again, what we're accustomed to all of a sudden.
It is, but I think Ford did run into a couple of problems here. For example, in the My Ford Touch, the way that you increase the volume is you slide your finger on this little bar that juts out of the center stack. Well, if you're going down the road and it's bouncing around, to get your finger on it and slide it is not nearly as easy as grabbing a knob and twisting it, like radios have been since the beginning. And by the way, if you have mittens or gloves on, you know, the knob still works a whole lot better. The other thing, too, is, again, and this is astonishing to me, Ford let the voice of the engineer creep too much into the system instead of the voice of the customer. So what they found now is they put way too much on there. Very complicated just by adding so much to it. Well, the engineers loved all this stuff, right. But I'm surprised that their market research didn't catch this earlier, because this was the exact same problem with the iDrive when it came out from BMW.
Right.
They, you know, BMW took me through a classroom showing me everything that it could do, and the original version had 750 functions that you could control in the car.
But as you're sitting in the classroom, or as I get the demonstration at the auto show in a quiet booth, wasn't it fantastic? And you're just so excited about it.
It was and it wasn't, because I was awed by the you know, the technology. But when they asked me at the end, what do you think of it? I said, I think it has about 720 functions too many.
Yeah. Well, then you get into
it was too much.
To get into the car, and again, and obviously a big issue nowadays with distraction and everything else going on, and this is the real challenge for all the automakers in their infotainment systems, is how do you provide the information, provide the interface, and not distract the driver. And that, you know, iDrive was that way, and when you get too many things.
Ford's done it right, because you've got the touch screen, so you can reach over and touch it. You've got the 5-way buttons on both sides of the steering wheel, so you can control it. And then there's redundancy. It's not just on the screen, it's also on the cluster gauge in front of you. And then you have voice controls as well. But part of the problem is Ford didn't spend the money to put in a fast enough processor. And especially on cold winter mornings when you go to hit the touch screen and you hit it and nothing happens, and you hit it again, you know, you get frustrated and you say, there's a problem, this doesn't work. Well, if you would just hold your finger there another second or two, it would work fine. And in the warm weather, it's much faster. But I still say, in my opinion, for what I've done recently, I used to think Acura had the best interface. Right now, I think Chrysler's got the best interface. They spent the money on a faster micro. The screen graphics are what I call play school simple, and it's just very easy to read. So there's ways of doing this that can work, and we all know Ford is feverishly at work trying to fix all this stuff right now.
Oh, they had a bunch of us were in this week at the Ford technology overview talking about this type of thing. And again, they're trying to expand the capabilities of voice recognition and everything around that, so that you don't, even with voice recognition, you have the words that you need to say, you know, phone, pair, Bluetooth, you know, in whatever order. And instead of this, the sentences like a Google search, how do I connect my phone? And then let it respond to you. So that's the next generation that we'll see.
Right, more natural language.
Yeah. I like the Audi that has the little touchpad in that you can actually write letters and spell them out and learn new Japanese character letters. If that's what
well, I've been driving an A8 all week long, and I'm like, Peter, I haven't even gotten to that yet. I'm just enjoying driving the car.
What?
Hey, why don't we take a break, and then we got to bring our guest on. But what we'd really like to do right now is thank our sponsor, Bridgestone. Bridgestone is featuring its third generation of run-flat tires with groundbreaking new technology. Current run-flat tires can offer peace of mind for consumers, but the added mass and the stiffer sidewalls can compromise ride comfort and fuel efficiency. The new third generation Bridgestone run-flat tires reduce heat and improve performance and ride comfort. Whether you're a program manager in the industry or just looking for a set for your personal car, check it out at BridgestoneTire.com. And joining us in the studio right now, we've got Chris Borroni-Bird from General Motors. Chris, great having you here.
Nice to be here. Thanks a lot, John.
So give us your title. What are you exactly? What's your job description? What do you do at General Motors besides having this great toy box that you get to play in?
Well, I'm a Director of Advanced Technology Vehicle Concepts. Actually, Director of the NV program as well, which is Electric Networked Vehicle.
These are the pod cars that Peter was talking about. That's why he called you the king of the pod people.
You could call them pod cars, yes.
Because they look like little pods, little two-seater. They're Segway kind of technology, but with a full body on them.
Right. Basically, instead of starting with technology and thinking about how can we create a new vehicle based on emerging technology, we said, let's look at some trends, societal trends. And one of the biggest societal trends going is urbanization. More and more of the world's population are living in cities.
Megacities.
Well, not just megacities, but even smaller cities. Like 50% of the world's population now lives in cities for the first time in history, and it's growing. By the year 2030, it'll be 60%. So we're planning a lot of growth in emerging markets like in China and India. And what's happening is a lot of people in China and India are moving from rural areas, agricultural areas, to industrial urban areas. And these cities are really densely populated. You think of Manhattan on steroids. I mean, we are talking densely populated. And you know, a lot of people in Manhattan don't own a car because it's just not a practical way to move around. Well, what happens if cities even more densely populated than Manhattan have full of people who can afford cars, but it's just not a practical way to move around? So we figured we needed to come up with a new solution. How do we preserve, or better still, enhance personal mobility, even in these most challenging of circumstances? So we developed these small electric networked vehicles. They're electric, so they don't produce pollution, at least locally in the city, and they can run on renewable energy sources. They're small, so they're easy to park, and they can be very affordable. They're lightweight as well, and they're networked, very importantly, because we can't solve congestion. You can't find parking anymore easily. You can't avoid accidents necessarily just by making the vehicle cleaner and smaller. So we were trying to solve all of the challenges associated with personal mobility. And that's the vehicle you drove earlier today. You rode it.
I should mention to everybody that Chris had his people bring over one of these Envies, and I got to drive it around in the parking lot here, and I actually got to drive it too, and it's really cool. It's you guys are really onto something here. Not for our present-day driving situation in most of the United States, but as you're talking about looking forward into the future, where the population of the world explodes, you know, well above what it is right now, it does make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think in America, because land is so plentiful, you know, if you can solve the energy and the environmental challenge, you know, with plug-in hybrids or extended range electric vehicles, you're almost there in terms of societal challenges and make the vehicles safer. But in these cities, it's not enough just to make them cleaner. As I said, you've got to address the congestion, parking. So that's why we really think a small vehicle, it doesn't necessarily have to be balanced, although the vehicle we developed for the Shanghai World Expo last year was based on a Segway platform. But really the essential aspects of this vehicle is it should be small, it should be electric, it should be networked and capable of autonomous operation and manual operation.
And I got to believe what you're talking about too is kind of like Zipcar. You may not personally own this. You would just whip out your phone, call a car that would come right to you, and you would use it for the time that you need.
Exactly, like the bicycle sharing scheme in Paris. Maybe
Velib.
Yes, very good. You may own a personal vehicle, like a car that's full function, a Swiss Army knife basically, that can go 300 miles and 150 miles an hour or whatever. But for when you want to go downtown, maybe you drive one of these, and maybe you don't own it. Like you said, it could be a shared vehicle. Maybe owned by the city.
You know, Chris, you keep using the word car, and when we're looking at this,
it doesn't look like a car, does it?
You know, I like the word personal mobility myself, but I mean, do you use that word at all? Or
No,
do you
looks
just,
like an Alice in
Car in inverted commas. I call it a vehicle.
vehicle? Okay.
looks like an Alice in Wonderland teacup ride at the local fair.
We wanted to show that this future is something that we can look forward to, not that it's going to be a boring, drab future where we're all driving these small econo boxes that have no personality. We think that this future, you know, if you get to a future where vehicles don't crash into each other, you can really design tremendously.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that, because we are on the verge of having vehicle-to-vehicle communication that conceptually can make it almost impossible. I say almost because we are human after all. Almost impossible to have vehicles crash into each other or anything else for that matter.
Yeah, these NV vehicles have a combination of sensing technology as well as communications technology, so it's a little bit more robust than one or the other by themselves. So it is possible to think of a future where if all of the vehicles have this same technology on them, you could get to a point where vehicles don't crash into each other.
And now we don't need seatbelts, we don't need airbags, we don't need thousands of pounds or kilos of structure.
Yeah, you could take a lot of mass out of the vehicle, you could use really cheap materials, which would make them very affordable for emerging markets, which is where these vehicles may make the most sense. It begins to be very exciting from a design perspective.
Well, I'll only argue the airbag parts of that, because for some of us not to really hit each other, we just have to stop really quickly, and that can be just as frightful as actually hitting something. But I'm curious, the communication, how much of it is dependent on a third party or network or cell phone towers or that type of thing?
It is an internet for vehicles, basically. Yeah. We call it a mobility internet. So think about today's cars being like standalone desktop PCs from the 1980s. We all remember them, even I do. You know, they were basically glorified typewriters. Well, this car that you just saw before, car in inverted commas, is more like a smartphone. It's much smaller, but it's networked together. And that's what vehicles in the future have to be, because we're not going to solve the challenges associated with congestion and finding parking more easily without networking these vehicles together.
And you're talking, it can be more than just pod cars. You're just talking about networking all vehicles together.
Absolutely. The same technology
Class
could apply
A trucks, semis.
Exactly.
Everything.
Buses. Yeah, it doesn't have to be applied only to small vehicles. The small vehicles make sense in an urban environment where space is limited, but the same technology can be applied to conventional automobiles and trucks and so forth to reduce accidents and enable autonomous driving in the future.
So when do we see something like this actually be available?
Well, a lot of it depends not only on the vehicle itself and the technology, but also the environment in which it can operate. If you had a car-free area right now, you could imagine these vehicles being introduced quite slowly, quite soon I should say, maybe with manual operation initially and then migrating to autonomous as the systems become more robust.
So gated communities, retirement communities, that sort of the thing?
And then if you think about, yes, and then or car-free city centers or whatever, pedestrian zones and so forth. If you think about the traditional car that people are used to seeing in America, you can begin to think about autonomous operation being introduced maybe in in limited access areas, like on highways, where the vehicles are basically adaptive cruise control and lane keeping. That could happen before the end of the decade, where people can begin to experience autonomous operation in limited situations.
That's how I think it's going to develop. So you're right.
Yeah, okay. One for you. Next question.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting time to be in the auto industry.
What I find fascinating about this ENVI program that General Motors took on and did itself while the whole world is melting down around it. You know, it's going bankrupt. You're throwing off CEOs like there's no tomorrow, and yet you continued with this. And not only did you come up with these pod cars, you came up with 3 separate designs designed in 3 separate studios within General Motors. Why did you do that?
Well, we had a great opportunity with the Shanghai World Expo, which ran for 6 months last year. And GM and our joint venture partner, SAIC, we had a pavilion. We're the only car company with a pavilion at the World Expo. It was a really great opportunity and a very important market for GM to show a future for personal mobility. The overall theme of the expo was Better City, Better Life. And so we took that message and we said, how can we make the city function better? How can we make people's lives better through mobility? And so we had a great platform, and in fact, it's sort of an obligation, if you would like to think about it, to show a vision of the future, like we did at the New York World Fair in 1939, where we laid out the interstate highway system 20 years into the future. Well, that was all about enabling mobility for people, the freedom of movement. Well, that freedom of movement is somewhat constrained or at risk in cities like Shanghai in the future. So we had to come up with a different vision, which is the ENVI vision. So we had a reason to develop these vehicles, even in a tough, challenging financial situation, to really showcase these vehicles at the World Expo. And now they're in America. They've come back to America, and we're showcasing them here in America. And we wanted to show that this future is not just about everybody driving the same vehicle, because that may excite city planners, but it's not going to excite the general public. So we wanted to show that when you get to a vision where vehicles can drive autonomously, where they are capable of avoiding crashes, tremendous design freedom. So, and capable of autonomous operation, it enables 3 different designs. And I could go into more detail as to what these designs represent.
Well, we should mention, because one was done by Holden in Australia. One was done in Europe by your studios in Germany, right? And then one of the...
In LA.
In LA.
So the blue one was meant to represent freedom of movement for people who currently don't have it, the young, the old. So we call that cute and friendly in the initial stages of development. The red one, which was designed in Europe, was all about fashion. You know, tremendous fashion capabilities for these vehicles if you don't have to worry about design for crash anymore. And then the third one was around, you know, the California, was imagine you have a virtual reality experience. You're driving the vehicle, say maybe 10 miles an hour in congested traffic, but you have a Formula One race car experience inside the vehicle.
Oh my gosh.
You could have a fun drive every day to work, even though the vehicle's just tootling along slowly. So it's kind of whimsical, but very...
Peter's not buying that one.
Yeah, all of a sudden, game over, and you haven't left your driveway yet. You're sitting there going, oh, man.
They're going to be very comfortable with this approach, I can tell you.
Oh, my God. A quick GM Expo 74 was in Spokane, Washington, and your exhibit there had this thing called an airbag that my sister-in-law was actually doing the exhibit, and she pushed the button, it would slowly inflate, and this soft, billowy pillow would form out, and you're going, that looks really nice. I mean, like, you know, far from this explosive airbag that came out, but again, still decades or so before it was part of the automotive.
And it was the people who build your concept cars for auto shows that built this,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Because the thing that I like is the body's all carbon fiber, or pretty much carbon fiber. It's beautifully turned out. I mean, this stuff looks superb.
They're in good condition since they've been built over, you know, a year and a half ago. They're still in very good condition.
And I understand, too, that at the Shanghai show, you ran them 24/7. Yeah, and that you had like next to no failure with them.
Right. We had about 20-odd shows a day to the general public. Over 2 million people saw these vehicles. There were like 3 or 4 hour lines to get in to see the show. It won lots of awards for the best show. And then we drove the vehicle autonomously on the stage, outdoors. We did ride and drive events with media. We demonstrated autonomous operation, vehicles avoiding collisions with each other, automated parking and retrieval using a smartphone, platooning where the vehicles go in a sequence together like a train. We demonstrated a lot of cool features.
Formation driving.
Even
I got your wing. Yeah. I'm with you.
Hey, Ben, can we have that music again?
So they were in the New York Auto Show?
Yes, we showed them at the New York Auto Show. Yep. And the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas earlier this year, we had some ride and drive events. Journalists had a chance to ride the vehicles.
Well, how successful do you think this could be? Because a decade ago, we had you on our other show, Autoline, and you brought in what I thought was one of the most brilliant visions of the future of the automobile, what you called autonomy.
Yeah, I love that.
That was great.
It was so cool. It was like a skateboard, kind of a chassis with a fuel cell integrated into the chassis, and then you could just drop whatever kind of body that you want on it, a pickup or a commuter car or family sedan or whatever.
Four-wheel drive, I mean all-wheel drive, all four electric
steer.
motor,
Right.
all-wheel steer.
And it was brilliant. Is that ever going to happen?
Well, the NB concepts have really taken that concept a little bit further. It is a mini skateboard. Think about a skateboard that's half the length.
And only
But
2
it's-
wheels.
And only 2 wheels, although it could be 4 wheels or 3 wheels. But instead of thinking about crash requirements, like the original Autonomy still had a front end, if you don't have to worry about crash in the future, then you could even have more design freedom. Not only do you have no engine compartment, but you may not have to worry so much about crash requirements in the future if you can get to this vision of vehicles that don't crash into each other. What I find so exciting about the NB concept is the potential for it to be affordable. You know, these vehicles don't have 300 miles range, they don't go 100 miles an hour. They have speed and range that's required for urban driving. And that really allows us to think about making these vehicles a lot more affordable than traditional electric vehicles.
What is the optimal
very
speed
exciting.
for urban transportation?
I would say somewhere between 10 and 20 miles an hour.
That all?
That's how fast people are driving in Manhattan today, is the average traffic speeds. It's a low bar.
Wow.
It sets the bar low, and so if you can provide people with an autonomous driving experience where they know when they're going to arrive, they have predictable travel time, and they can be productive and use the time and not be stressed out being stuck in congestion, you've got a win on your hands. And if the vehicle can go and park itself, that buys you some time as well. People don't realize how much time they waste just finding parking and then having to walk back from where the vehicle is parked to where they actually want to go.
Yeah,
They don't
no, I
factor that
agree
into
totally.
the speed of movement.
I'm thinking of all these Manhattanites going down like Fifth Avenue in some, virtual world. They're all, on Hawaii.
No,
they're
what I can
racing
see
each other or something
Manhattan is
like
they're going to have all these autonomous pod cars and still be complaining about how you can't get a taxi.
that. Can't get a pod taxi.
So when you say affordable, what are you talking about? A Chevy Volt's $41,000. What would an
We haven't
NV be?
done.
I know. Well, what's
specific
the
cost
target?
studies,
What
but I
should it
think
be?
these vehicles could cost under 10,000, and if they're shared vehicles, the cost of owning it is taken away somewhat. I mean, somebody has to buy the vehicles, obviously, but it's amortized over a much longer period of time, and so.
Sure, you might only pay for it by the hour
Exactly.
at that point.
We'll start
So the
working on cost of
affordability-
ownership right away on that. and
Yeah,
I'll get back to you.
Yeah,
I think the
Mr.
battery-
IntelliChoice expert, what do you
Yes.
think about this? Is he telling the truth or
This
what?
vehicle weighs about 1/4 of what a traditional car weighs, and it only has to go about 40-50 kilometers before it gets recharged, because it's being used in an urban environment. So we think maybe a 4 or 5 kilowatt-hour battery is about the right size. So it's significantly smaller than the one in the Volt. Really, it's a vehicle that's tailor-made for urban environments. It's not trying to be a jack of all trades or a Swiss Army knife, because that's where you get a lot of flexibility, but it drives the cost as well. This is really a vehicle designed purely for urban markets, and because urban markets are a growing and increasingly important fraction of the world market, it's not a niche we can afford to ignore.
From an engineering or physiological standpoint, I guess, a vehicle moving along, obviously if it's communicating with other vehicles, there can be some avoidance, but there's inanimate objects out there that, I mean...
That's where the sensing is
exactly,
required.
but so again, from a speed standpoint, I mean, to go from speed to stop and,
Yes.
and not have a lot of structure built in,
Yeah.
you really can only be going, again, 12 to 20 miles an hour. Is that a...
Well, and that's the speed that we're thinking about for urban environments. But the same technology that's going to be needed for cars is going to have to accommodate higher speeds of deceleration than
Yeah.
that. So we're developing active safety technologies that will prevent collisions taking place.
I'm reminded, the Volvo system that has the face recognition on whether they're going to put the brakes on easy or hard. I mean, in other words, they'll let you hit the telephone pole a little bit, but if it's a person, you're aware of that? You've seen that? And,
No, I knew they had pedestrian braking.
Right,
but
that's what I mean. In other words, if you're crossing the street in front of them, it's a person, they'll slam the brakes on harder than just an inanimate object that may not again, threaten somebody on the outside as much. Which just conceptually it's an interesting concept to say, again, you have the front of the car that can do some of the absorption there. What you're saying is all gone in this, this type of mobility.
Yeah. Hey, look, I haven't been watching the time here. We got to take another commercial break. And now we would really like to thank our friends at Hyundai. Hyundai is known for the great value that it offers, but let's not forget about the technology. The Hyundai Sonata is the first vehicle in its segment with standard integrated Bluetooth hands-free phone. It's the first vehicle in its segment with factory-installed HD radio technology with multicasting. And it's the first vehicle in its segment with XM nav traffic and XM data services. That, plus NHTSA's 5-star overall crash test rating and the IIHS top safety pick, explain why the Sonata is selling so well. And you can check it all out at HyundaiSonata.com. Chris, one other question before we get to rapid fire here is General Motors has done phenomenal technology, future technology over the world. You did one of the Autonomy. But is anybody inside GM trying to put a business case for these NVs together? Are they saying, Chris, boy, you nailed it, man. Now how do we put this in production and sell these things in China?
Well, I think the China market is one of the most appealing markets for us to go after, and certainly there's a pull in China for this. We just signed a memorandum of understanding with an eco-city in China. It's called the Sino-Singapore Tianjin Eco-City. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's just outside Tianjin, which is like the 4th largest city in China, 10 million people. There's an eco-city being built from ground up, and we're planning to look at how to integrate vehicles like next generation NV into that environment, because we see the China market being key. They have the eco-cities that are being planned ground up. They have a strong interest in promoting lightweight, low-speed electric vehicles. And so the China market really is where we're putting a lot of our effort. We'd love to do a demonstration, a pilot program here in America, and we're looking into that, but we're also focused a lot on on China for this type of vehicle technology. And hopefully, through the course of the next few years, we can put together a whole compelling business case, as well as demonstrating the vehicles operating in a somewhat real-world environment, but controlled as well, sort of a stepping stone between a parking lot demonstration and putting them on the streets of an existing city. That's where this eco-city falls into.
So it's no longer an issue of developing the technology, now it's really an issue of developing the market.
Well, I think it's both, but the technology development, it's one thing to develop the technology and demonstrate it in a parking lot, you know, the autonomous operation and the wireless communications, the connectivity, but you really want to prove it out day in, day out using, you know, normal, regular people to prove out connectivity. It's one thing to lose connectivity when you're on a computer at home, but when you're relying on it for vehicles, you've got to be really confident it works. So that's why we think the sensing technology is still going to be needed. So it still needs to be proven out in a daily operation under all weather conditions and so forth. We need to prove it out but I think that the market and the legal situation, all those things come into play.
We had the whole thing almost solved and you had to bring up legal. God, it was almost, we were right there. It was done.
Now, Mark Royce, you know, the head of GM North America, has suggested that this development take place in the city of Detroit and start connecting parts of the city that desperately need it.
We need to find places that are willing to be test beds for this, where we can demonstrate autonomous vehicles, maybe electric vehicles, car sharing systems, get customer reaction, real people's reaction to this. And like I said, if we can demonstrate something here in North America, that would be terrific. It really would.
Obviously not the only automaker in town. Ford was demonstrating some smart intersection technology just this week. Are you guys all working together?
Yes, General Motors actually, we've been working with Ford and other car companies on vehicle-to-vehicle communications, as well as vehicle-to-infrastructure communications. So there is a lot of interest in collaborating with other car companies in terms of consortiums for developing protocols, because obviously these vehicles will have to communicate with each other. You have to create standards, so that work is going on here and in other continents.
If we go Betamax VHS, they're just going to be crashing into each other.
Charlie, that's exactly the issue that has been brought up on this V2V, vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and the IEEE and the SAE are involved, and you know, once you get into regulatory standards, it gets real slow, because everyone says, yeah, we really have to commonize on a standard. Let's commonize on mine.
Right.
And every country and every company has that argument. They want to use
I mean,
theirs.
started the show on technology, and I mean, again, even outside of our industry, you know, there are usability, and we're used to doing things, and we have, whether it's cell towers or internet or Wi-Fi or that exist, to whatever extent we can bring that all into play, would be that much better.
Hey, look, we got to get to rapid fire, but first we're going to take another quick commercial break. We've got to thank our friends at Chevrolet for that. The Chevrolet Cruze is the car that is taking the world by storm, and a key reason is all the equipment that it offers. A driver information center, a USB port, ambient LED backlighting on the dashboard, remote start with a MyLink app, 2 accessory power outlets, one in front and one in the back for the rear passengers, OnStart, turn-by-turn directions, free for the first 6 months. Whew, there's just too much to list here, and you can check it all out at Chevrolet.com/cruise. Okay, it's time to get to rapid fire. Ben, let's bring it up. I love hearing the shell casings hit the floor. That's my favorite part. Okay, Steve wants to know, how is this autonomous vehicle going to interact with motorcycles, especially in Asia, with far more people riding motorcycles?
That's a very good question. It's one thing for us to be making sure that we don't have an accident with a car, but we have to be very, very concerned about interactions with pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists, because most of the people getting hurt on the roads in cities in China are not people in the vehicles, because the traffic's not going that fast in cities, but it's the other vulnerable road users. So the technology for autonomous operation has to have robust sensing technology that can sense. You know, obviously we're going to be moving at a relatively low speed, at least initially, which helps, but the technology for sensing obstacles, and by obstacles I mean pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists, is going to have to be very robust under all weather conditions. So that's what's being developed. That's what we're proving out.
But you're saying the technology is there. You just have to develop more thoroughly.
Yes.
And that's what we've seen even in the DARPA Urban Challenge, for example, is it can sense pedestrians and other things going on.
Yeah. Well, the DARPA Urban Challenge was kind of somewhat of a controlled urban setting. There weren't that many pedestrians walking out.
No, there weren't any pedestrians actually, but what the teams assured me is that if there were pedestrians, their systems would accommodate that.
That's the chaotic nature of an urban environment is a challenge that we have to work through. It's autonomous operation in an urban environment is very attractive because that's when driving is least fun and it's where people are going very slowly in congested traffic, but we have to be concerned about pedestrians cutting in and out and cyclists. So the sensing technology is our line of defense there. In the future, maybe pedestrians and cyclists will have a transponder, maybe in the bicycle helmet. We've demonstrated that at GM.
No, why don't we just go all the way like pets, where they put the thing under your skin? Everyone's going to have that in the future, John. You're asking for this. It's coming. We'll get our little thing underneath the skin in the back like they do in pets, you know, for lots of pets.
Right. Yeah.
Only it'll be like the master cylinder will communicate if you're riding.
An app on my smartphone, and I'm going to go down the street just zapping everyone who steps in front of me.
If you're riding a motorcycle, if you've got the chip, it's okay, because you'll be controlled.
Yeah, but don't wear a helmet.
Okay, 007 Mitch W. says, in the future, if I'm driving up First Avenue in Manhattan at 40 miles an hour, will your buggy dent my hoopty?
No, you just hose them out of the grill when you get home.
Yeah.
Jay Cujo says, does anyone at GM Design wish that they could have pulled off a car like the Lingenfelter Trans Am Firebird? That's what you need, is a pod that looks like a Trans Am.
God, well, I don't know why that didn't come out of the design effort.
You can design it however you like, really. That's the beauty of this vision.
You keep talking about, you know, again, the weather, and I get that, you know, particularly here in Michigan, but the big cities, I mean, could you do something that was not so capable in a real cold weather situation that would be easier to do, obviously? It's not
only the cold weather, it's like if there's a lot of smog. A lot of these cities, especially in Asia, have pollution.
Right.
The sky isn't that clear, and sometimes cyclists are hard to see.
Yeah.
So it's more than just, you know, cold weather that we need to be concerned about.
Goggles Pisano says, how hard would it be for GM to make one that looked like, say, one of the ghosts in Pac-Man? That way police cars can be painted yellow with block side windows, and the lane markings can be changed into smaller dots, if you will. The fastest commuter of the day can get a high score.
Exactly. How do you get it to go reverse? Yeah.
VRM Chris says, I can see these pods in an urban environment limited to 40 kilometers an hour, but not a highway interstate expressway.
Well, that's perhaps true unless you think about these pods docking onto a train or a high-speed bus or something, and the bus basically taking them, or the train. That's a concept that's kind of interesting. It was shown last year at an auto show, I think in Geneva, but you know, I think that's not out of the range of possibility.
So how much
does
it weigh?
The ones that we've developed weigh about 400 kilograms, 900 pounds. So it's about a quarter of what a traditional car might weigh.
But what Chris was telling me earlier when I was out driving it is that they know that they can take weight out, but it will probably not come down in weight because they'll be adding features like air conditioning and you know, all that sort of thing. But
if you're not going to hit anything, what do you need a windshield wiper for?
and besides, I agree with the comment that the pods would not work on an interstate, but I do believe that autonomous cars will absolutely come to the interstate. Yeah. That's my belief. Yeah, whatever happened, here's another question. Whatever happened to the GM Autonomy? Are they still working on that, or is the focus on the pod vehicles now?
Well, the GM Autonomy was based on a fuel cell-enabled skateboard. I think the skateboard principle works even better if you have a battery, because you don't have to package for the hydrogen tanks. So if you talk about a pure battery electric vehicle, the idea of it being a flat sandwich floor chassis isn't out of the question at all. One of the challenges at Stoke, though, still with the autonomy concept, is pure by-wire. By-wire still isn't legal, so completely having electric brakes and electric steering systems is, you know, not allowed from a regulatory standpoint. You still,
even though every airplane is, you know, fly-by-wire, we can't drive on the street with that same technology.
We could have a chassis that's like a skateboard, but the links to it couldn't be purely electrical, at least at the moment.
Do you see that changing? It's got to change, right?
Well, I think for the types of vehicles we're talking about, for these really low-speed vehicles, there may be some more flexibility there. But for high-speed vehicles, we need a lot more development.
What's the worry that, you know, some extraneous signals or somebody might even be trying to deliberately hack into it and make you crash?
I think it's proving out the reliability. A mechanical system can fail, but it's very rare for your brakes or your steering system to fail. It can happen, but it's extremely rare. We need to prove that we can develop a purely electrical system that has at least the same reliability and is affordable. Because you can create great reliability, but with a lot of redundancy, like aircraft can afford reliability and redundancy. You know, they can put in triple redundancy, for example, which may not be possible in a car that's
not affordable.
Yeah, so making it affordable, reliable at the same time is the challenge.
So you can get it to work. Does the platform, whether it's fuel cell or battery, weigh approximately the same size? And
I think the fuel cell has the advantage that it can go a lot further than a pure battery. We think the pure battery vehicle can make sense in an urban environment where you don't have to drive very far. But when you want to go longer distances, that's where
there's more energy storage in the fuel cell version. Okay.
So the fuel cell, it really fills a sweet spot where you want long range, zero emissions, fast refueling or recharging.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
The best solution.
Hey, see, we've got a phone call here, Ben. Let's bring it in.
Hi, this is Jeff W. from Albany, New York. My question is for Peter, that in light of Lieutenant Dan's actions and recent statements, has your opinion of Big Ed's performance at GM changed at all? Compared to Lieutenant Dan, Big Ed seems like a saint. Thanks.
Well, you know, I think Ed was, in retrospect, was the right guy for that moment. I think he would have been better if he stayed a little longer, because he let the true believers do what they do. You know, he was famous, so I don't know about that. You guys take care of that. So I don't know. Jury's still out. Dan can still turn it around, I think, but he's going to have to stop talking to the media.
Yeah.
Flat out. There has to be a moratorium on any more conversations with the media.
Got another call here from Brooklyn. Is the pod car made from advanced composites? They all keep calling it the pod car. You don't like that. You like, envy.
Green with envy. I saw the headline in a UK newspaper. I thought that was pretty clever. Green with envy. Actually, it is. It's the vehicles that we showed at the Shanghai World Expo, the ones you saw on the video, are made from carbon fiber composite and polycarbonate glazing. But going forward, I mean, there's a lot of flexibility with materials. I mean, when you get to a point where vehicles don't have to crash into each other anymore,
Make them out of polypropylene.
or bamboo or whatever.
Bamboo. Grow a new fender.
Glenn E. says, can you imagine the cost of the infrastructure?
Well, I think the approach we're trying to take is heavily centered on the vehicle, having the technology. You know, we may be able to benefit from some infrastructure cost, but we're trying to put the technology on the vehicle for dedicated short-range communications, for positioning accuracy, sensing technology. Clearly, we'll need charging infrastructure. Like any electric drive vehicle, we'll need some electric charging infrastructure. But in terms of the crash avoidance requirements being met, I think we're trying to put that on the vehicle as much as possible and not rely on the infrastructure.
But, you know, so much of this infrastructure is like wireless technology, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, it can't be that expensive.
Well, you have a point there. In the past, when people have demonstrated automated highways, it was with sensors in the road, and that's clearly an expensive proposition to repave all the roads in a city. The approach we're taking now is a lot more focused on the wireless communications, and you know, cell phone towers, like you say, it's a lot more practical to imagine setting them up if you do need that support.
Yeah, between that and GPS, it seems like, you know, the grid could be moving around chess pieces, of which we're inside of.
That's right.
Oh, don't take the rook. Don't take the rook.
DC Auto Geek wants to know, how would the black MIT battery sludge change this technology?
I'm not aware of the
I think
battery
what he's
sludge.
referring to is MIT is working on a way of recharging batteries, of essentially like pouring in new electric.
Like a
you suck
refillable
out the old electrolyte, pour in the new stuff, boom, you're good to go in minutes.
Almost a cross between a battery and a fuel cell, in a sense.
Kind of like that, right.
Well, if it can meet the cost and the energy density targets that we have for today's batteries, it sounds like an interesting concept. It could, in theory, be faster refueling.
I would imagine you don't care how the energy is produced per se, do you?
Well,
or do you?
Clearly, you'd like the energy to be produced from clean sources of power, like a renewable. But I think one of the interesting things about these vehicles is they're so energy efficient because they're so lightweight and small, that even if you made the electricity from coal, which is what a lot of electricity in China is made from coal, the well-to-wheels CO2 emissions can still be very attractive with this vehicle being so energy efficient at the end use. But clearly you'd like the source of electricity to be made from increasingly cleaner sources of power. And I think that's what people talk about electric-powered vehicles, is that over time they become cleaner because the electricity becomes cleaner over time.
In theory.
In theory. We hope.
We think that's going to happen, right. Comment from Jim. He says, when does GM send out repo men to get its cars back and he's talking about Saab. When does GM send out the repo men to get back its cars and parts from the new Saab that they are owed money on? Does Saab owe GM money? I don't think so.
I don't know about that.
I don't know, but
think so.
Saab, we just got the word today, they can't even pay their employees.
Yeah.
So it does not look good.
They signed the deal with China, but it's
Two different Chinese companies. But, if you can't meet your payroll.
Right. Let's see.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, and again, it's the California guy here, when you talk about using mittens on volume controls and coal, I'm just thinking about that pod as I saw the video, John being out there on the last time I was here on an icy day out in the parking lot there, how that vehicle would slide around on a slippery surface.
How the Envy would?
Right.
Well, I think the important thing to recognize with the Envy is what you saw is an embodiment that we developed at the Shanghai World Expo. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to show a vision of the future. You don't want to show just a traditional-looking vehicle people have seen before. So you wanted to show something somewhat magical. So it worked really well, as you can see. Going forward, as we think about this, we're really focused on it being a small vehicle, an electric vehicle, a network vehicle. Whether it's one passenger, 2, 3, or 4, those are embodiments. And whether it's got one wheel, 2, 3, 4, those, again, embodiments. All of these are in play. We don't have to think of ourselves as being limited by 2 wheels with 2 passengers sitting side by side. So long as they're small, they're networked, they're electric, they're compatible with each other, there could be tremendous diversity to meet different needs.
Well, and I applaud your challenge as a manufacturer to make the vehicle available in all climates. But practicality might state that here's vehicles for this climate only, or not, not for this other.
As you begin to think about designing vehicles for cities, if there's enough demand from a city for us, you could really optimize the design. You could take into account the road surfaces in that city, the grades in the city, the climate in the city, and really optimize, with a fine.
Well, not only that, but with network vehicles, the first one that hits a patch of ice sends that signal to everybody else, hey, there's a patch of ice here.
Yes.
So that's the beauty of networking.
And we'd be going at a slower speed, so it's probably
But the first slow-speed city-specific vehicle that came to mind was the cable car, so I'm not sure that.
Yeah, have we really made progress? Greg says, Peter, as someone who has had a few letters appear on your site, I felt good until you said the ones you don't publish are even better. Ah, geez.
Well, see, a lot of the people who talk to me because I don't reveal their names, and we keep it that way.
Yeah. Steve Henderson says, how do you foresee the sales of the new Chevy Volt? Although I'm strictly a GM owner, 08 Sierra, 02 Corvette, both since new, I would not purchase a Volt for the high cost. Well, the high price, actually, the cost of ownership, right, Mr. IntelliChoice?
Right, and again, we're still trying to get our arms around the battery life and the value over time, because we all are assuming that there's going to be technology upgrades in batteries, but certainly the operational cost is, you've got low fuel costs, and again, GM's got, standing behind a lot of the powertrain for such an extended period of time, your repair and maintenance costs are considerably
Plus they have
lower.
a lease. I don't know
Well, that's what I was going to say.
what the 2012 lease is going to be like, but they did have that lease in place, which is quite,
right. So I don't know, Steve, what you're paying on your 08 Sierra or 02 Corvette, but I'll bet you the lease price on the Volt is cheaper than either one of them. I could be wrong on the Sierra, but I'll bet I'm absolutely right on the Vet, because you can lease a Volt for $351 a month, I want to say.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much middle of the pack these days, so don't get scared off by the $42,000 price tag, or $41,000, whatever it is. You can lease these things pretty well.
I think the Volt, they'll make them as many as they can, and I think for a lot of people they're the perfect solution.
I think it's a great bridge technology.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think, and they did a masterful job on it. So
I agree. George from Brooklyn says, will the Sonic be a boom or a bust sales-wise?
it's hard to say. I think
it's a good question.
Yeah, that's a real good question. I think it's a pretty cool car, but as John, you pointed out, people are fickle with these high gas prices.
Right.
You'd think that all the cars you're seeing, all the hybrids would be booming, but they're not necessarily doing that.
Hybrids are still 2.5% of the market.
Right.
I think when the gas spike first happened in 08, that was just like a game changer.
Right.
Now, here we are 3 years later, and people seem to be fretting as much.
No, and then when it went up, and all of a sudden you look at a study that says, 10 years ago was it $1 something? You're going, what? It was really? Because all of a sudden you're used to this $3 to $4 range.
I also think people say, hey, I got no choice. I got to put gas in my vehicle. So after a while, what does bitching about $4 really mean? I mean, they're just kind of, it's completely different than it was in 08. 08, it was like, the sky is falling.
Well, it's the rate of increase, too. Yeah. It's the old, you cook the frog slowly kind of an analogy. And, in 08, it just shot up overnight. Yeah. Jay Cujo says, back in 2009, when this show started, Tesla and Fisker said they'd have cars by 2010. It's now 2011 and no sight of anything from either. Not to mention you only have 2 more months to get their only vehicle. Can you say vaporware?
Well, Fisker showed up in Rob Report, so that means it's legit. Just kidding.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I like the Rob Report, but I mean, if you have 100 and some grand, you can sort of get a Fisker maybe by the end of the year.
They were supposed to start delivering this spring, and then it's now in the fall. They're in our backyard, and they
Yeah.
just moved to a larger building, and they're
And now
continuing to hire.
Tesla's ceased production of the sports car because they're going to focus on the Model S. And it's just like, what?
Yeah.
Is that over already? I mean, you know.
I think the electric car selling in big numbers is not in this decade. I'm not even sure it's in the next decade.
Yeah.
It's
and remind, Fisker is not all electric. It's a
hybrid.
exactly.
Right.
E-Rev, yeah.
Well, look, it's probably time that we start wrapping things up here, but Chris Borroni-Bird, fantastic coming on, and even more fantastic bringing one of the Envies here that I got to drive. That was so cool. That was
Glad we could do
excellent.
that for you. Thank you very much.
Charlie, you're shaking your head in wonder.
I just want to know why it's not parked outside.
Yeah, yeah.
You got me walking around the building looking for it. I'm going, or do you hide the thing?
And Charlie Vogelheim from IntelliChoice. Great having you
Hey,
here,
I
too.
appreciate the opportunity, always.
And Peter, I'm not
John?
even going to say goodbye to you. So
Yeah.
we'll just say, oh, and we got to
What
talk about next week's show.
The big show.
That
Big show,
is.
because next week, folks, we're having the first automotive fantasy draft. And it's going to be me and Peter and Jim Hall and Ed Lapham from Automotive News. We've each created our own car company. Mine's Dymaxion Motors, named after one of my heroes, Buckminster Fuller, who created a Dymaxion car in the 1930s that even Chris Borroni-Bird hasn't caught up to yet. That's how far advanced Buckminster was.
You spend half the show marketing your company, aren't you?
And Peter's got Renzo Motors.
The debut of Renzo Motor, yes, yes.
So anyway, here's the concept. The four of us have got our car companies, and just like the NFL draft, we're going to do a round robin going around drafting our dream team of present day alive automotive executives. Now,
Non-retired or?
no, if they're retired or if they're off doing some consulting, they're still available, but they can't be dead because you know, nobody from history.
I thought Chip said they couldn't be retired.
Well, we're going to have to. Oh, look, here we've got the Renzo Motors logo.
Yeah, how's that? Cool, huh?
And there's DeWard. That's Edward Lapham's
Yeah.
logo.
You gonna get Jim Hall to open up a little bit?
Oh my God, Jim Hall. Oh my, he has designed a car. He has designed a car. His is the Bistango. That apparently is some crazy thing that he and his brother came up with years ago. So we're going to have to see what that's all about. Anyway, we're going to be doing this draft. Mark Phelan from the Detroit Free Press and Scott Burgess from the Detroit News are going to be doing the play-by-play analysis as we make our choices.
Fantastic.
It'll be a hoot. In fact, if you want to go see some more of the logos and the car companies that have been revealed, Peter put out a press release already on his,
Hey,
too. I
no.
can't believe these guys are really getting into it.
Can I be the roving reporter like in the halls of Hyundai or Toyota as the draft is going on and see the reaction from the working?
Yeah, we need that
The
West
in-
Coast representation,
Exactly.
Charlie.
The industry's going to be tuning in that night.
I think they will. This is going to be a hoot. You can go to the John's Journal section of our website right now. We've got some of the stuff posted. Also, Chevy and Hyundai are giving us some pretty cool stuff to give away. We're going to have a good model, working model of the Chevy Volt. Hyundai sent us some really cool jackets and some other things. The boxes are just coming in, so I don't know
You
what's
want
all
something
there.
from like the Ward Motors or something.
Right. So we're going to open it up to you, the audience, and if you guys come up with a list of your fantasy executives or a list of what you would want on your own car company, and if you're anywhere close to us, you're going to win prizes too. So we're going to get the audience involved in this. And one more promo, don't forget, we're still giving away Bob Lutz's book, an autographed copy of it. Go to bit.ly/Autoline contest. You can get all the things, but tomorrow's the drawing, so you better get in there tonight if you're going to try to win this book. And is there anything else? Oh yeah, don't forget, you can always friend us at Facebook, facebook.com/Autoline Detroit. Follow us at twitter.com/Autoline. Peter, much to his chagrin, is creating a Facebook page.
Yes.
don't do it.
I have to because there's an interloper out there who's trying to use Autoextremist. So
Yeah.
our East Coast correspondent, AJ Morning, is hard at work on that as we speak.
Charlie, they can find stuff at IntelliChoice.com.
IntelliChoice has a website. We're part of the Motor Trend Auto Group, but we've got cost of ownership. It'll be all new next month, and very excited about that.
Now we need an Envy.com, Chris.
We do. We have a
Oh, you do? Oh,
We have
I'm
a
glad I
YouTube
said
channel,
so.
General Motors
you're good.
Envy YouTube channel.
General Motor. Oh yeah, go to
General Motors
YouTube. You guys
Envy,
have got.
all one word.
They have a really cool video of the Envy concept there, with very much like you know, Futurama kind of vision of what a future Shanghai-like city could be
And
in the
video
future.
of it operating autonomously and manually. Yep.
It's pretty cool. I saw that thing. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone, passion for excellence. Chevrolet, the all-new Chevrolet Cruze. Get used to more. And by Hyundai. Experience the 2011 Hyundai Sonata today at HyundaiSonata.com.
Cool. This was good. This really worked.
Chris seemed disappointed that you didn't ask him to weigh in on the discussion with the leadership at his company.
I deliberately did.
I was itching to ask you, but I'm going to get
He
interrupted.
seemed very disappointed.
We did not want to get Chris in trouble.
Thank you.
He's a friend of ours, and we want to make sure he stays employed at his company. So we kept him a mile away from that one.
More airplay in GM than I would have banked on.
That's good. Well, this went great, Chris.
Thank you.
This
Thank you
went
very much
terrific.
for-
Yeah,
It's
thank
great
you.
having you back here.
It's very good to have you.
Like the Twilight Zone music. It is Twilight Zone, isn't it?
No, I think that's just,
No, that's,
just like.
Well, listen, you know how electric
Like the
vehicles...
Beach Boys. What's the one at the end of Good Vibrations?
Oh, yeah, it does sound like that, right. But you know how electric cars have got to emanate some sort of sound
Yeah.
for impaired...
Clicking noise, don't we?
That's what the Envy should do as you go down the
Clicking
street.
noise. Those detectors. Did you hear the clicking noises?
Oh, I did hear the clicking noises, but I just thought that...
Detectors.
Oh,
Nothing to do with the electric battery.
What's
Thank you.
the clicking noise?
Oh, it's the ultrasonic detectors at the front of the vehicle. Making clicking noise when it detects it.
I mean, you know, we might get like those pets, John. We might all get little chips under our skin and on our neck.
that's right.
So it tells you who, you know, if you get in an accident in your pod car, you know, they'll just, you know, they'll have that information.
Dan, you're going to do this.
When I was sitting there. Yeah. So I used, let's put this back.
Back when I was at school,